Good morning. Good morning for those online. I might later join because then I can also show from my computer, right? We'll see. We'll see. Um, Good morning. Thank you for your bravery for showing up, which is including myself, talking here about the tenet systems in Tibetan Buddhism, which is not an easy topic, and which means that we have to. In order to understand, we have to use our brain in a way that our brain is not used to. So that can be a little bit challenging. We also, yesterday we did a small introduction. I don't know, did you follow that online? Or yes, yes. So and then we saw that the tenets. It's not just about who is right, and it's not just about developing the right view, and we just look into the right teachings and all the other ones. Yeah, we know that they exist, but we don't really care so much about it. But understanding the tenets is about understanding Buddhist teachings, right? When we understand the different views of the different tenet systems, and we use that understanding when we study Buddhist teachings, we get a completely different perspective on what the Buddha was teaching and how we need to understand the teachings, what we need to interpret, what we need to take literally, and why it is like that. It's like it's deepened the understanding of the teachings so much. So there is a great benefit coming from studying the tenets, because we're gonna tenets are actually giving a perspective on how to listen to Buddhist teachings, right? And we know that when we think about human beings and sentient beings, there are so many sentient beings with different interests, with different capacities, that when they hear Buddha's teachings, they all hear something different. Right. And so the Tanist schools are coming from that. It's coming from their understanding of Buddhist teachings. And so then we have to go through these understandings in order for ourselves to come to a conclusion. Oh, then where am I? Right? Because we can think, oh, these Hinayana Tanits, I'm not like that. But if we really look into the way that the Hinayanist posits their Tanits, we might think, yeah, they have some points there. Yeah, I also think a little bit like that, right? So it's not that it represents something outside of us, but they all represent layers of our own understanding. If we say that all the teachings are meant, the Buddha taught in order to, his motivation was, I want to free all sentient beings from suffering. And how do I free sentient beings from suffering? By teaching them the nature of reality. That's the most profound object to realize, that nature of reality. That's the most subtle object to be realized. With our yeah. I mean, then I'm not talking about tantra, but it is about in the sutra perspective. It's the most subtle thing to be realized. So in order to do that, we cannot just dive deeply into our own mind and get to that most subtle object. In order to realize that, we need also a very subtle mind. We can't just go there, right? We start on the course level, and then we have to kind of peel off, or we have to develop the mind so that we can perceive more subtle states of mind. And with that, we can perceive more subtle objects and more subtle views of reality. All right. So when we study tenets, we also study our own mind. We study the different levels in our own mind. It's not separate from our own mind. Right. So these schools are not out there. These schools are they represent our own ways of thinking. Yes. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper today, or we're going through the text presenting the systems of the different schools. And we made a start yesterday with the first school, the Vaibhashika school, or the Great Exposition School. And we haven't finished that, so we will continue that today. But before we go there, maybe we start off with good motivation. Knowing that these most precious teachings have the capacity to touch us in the core of our being. We can call that our Buddha nature. We can call that our potential to develop our mind. And so we all have that Buddha potential. We all have the capacity or the potential to develop all the qualities that can be developed, to develop them fully, and to remove everything that obscures that. And once we have done that, we achieve a state of full awakening or a state of full enlightenment. And that is the meaning of the word Buddha. So we then become a Buddha. In order to be able to develop that state, we need to understand where we are right now, how our mind is functioning, how our mind is obscured, and what we need to do how we need to set a goal in order to achieve that Buddhahood. And so for this, we use the Lam Rim. In which we learn that if we are just concerned with this life as we are at the moment, when we haven't looked into developing our mind, we are only concerned about what are we going to eat today, how do we going to come by this month, who do I visit, what kind of presents do I buy them? That is mainly what is occupying the mind. Maybe our career, maybe the car we're driving, whether we have a good relationship with our neighbors or not. This is the scope of where our mind abides as what keeps us busy. And then when we study Dharma and we learn about that, well, this is not the only life that we are having. There is more lives are coming after that. And we learn about that potential that we have, that when we create the causes for that, we can develop that potential. Then the perspective of life becomes much, much bigger. It's not just about this life. It is also about me developing that potential, which might take many lifetimes. So if that is going to take many lifetimes, I have to make sure that in my next rebirth, I have at least the same kind of conditions that I have in this life, so that I can continue my journey, that I can continue my practice, that I can continue purifying the mind and developing all the good qualities. So that is what I first need to strive for, that what I'm doing is not just for now, but it is also for what comes after this. And then when we develop that mind that wishes to attain a good future rebirth with all the proper conditions, then we might think, but even if I have a good future rebirth, they're going to be, I'm not going to I'm not going to be sure what is going to happen after. Because maybe I will not meet with the teachings, and then I will not be able to generate a mind that is going to take care of my next life. So even if I have a good future rebirth, I'm still in samsara, which means I still have been born under the influence of karma and delusions, which means my mind is under the influence of karma and delusions, which means for sure I will create the causes of suffering. For sure, suffering will arise. Even if for a while I'm out of that suffering kind of on the course level. that is not going to last, because when we talk about cyclic existence, things come and go. They come and go. So then when we contemplate on the sufferings of samsara that keep coming and going, we generate a motivation that says, actually, I want to get rid of all the suffering. I want to get out of this samsaric existence in which I create the causes for suffering again and again, and in which I have to experience the results of that again and again. I want to get out of that. And so in order to get out of that, we need to become liberated from samsara. So we might generate that motivation. That is actually what I want. And then as Mahayanists, then we look around and we see that we are not the only one who is suffering in samsara, that we are all kind of in the same boat. All our brothers, our sisters, our fathers, our mothers, our whole family, all our friends, even all the people that we do not know, all the people that we see as our enemies, those that we don't like, they're all suffering from exactly the same. And so somehow we can't bear that. And we feel we want them also to be free of suffering. And although our wish might be very sincere, when we look at our own situation, we can see in my capacity right now, I can't do anything. I'm so limited. I can't even take care of myself. I don't even know how to get myself out of suffering. And even if I know how to get myself out of suffering, I don't have the capacity to help each and every sentient being. So how can I generate that capacity? Only when I become enlightened, only when I develop my full potential of wisdom and compassion, do I have the capacity to help each and every sentient being to become free of suffering. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do everything to develop that full potential, so that I will have that capacity to free each and every sentient being from their suffering. Think about what that means for you. And so when we think about the state of enlightenment, what that means is that we are setting out to develop something that we have never ever developed. Even liberation, we have never developed that. We are still in samsara. We don't even know how to create the causes for a good future rebirth, right? So we are like a little bit like we are here in Bern, and then somebody said, let's go to Lhasa by car. Felix has this great car. Let's go and drive to Lhasa. And then we said, but we don't know the way because we have never been there, right? So we need a good map. And we need maybe some people on the way that show us, no, you have to go this road, this direction. This direction is Lhasa. So we need a guide, whether that is in the form of a map or whether that is in the form of a person that is going to help us. And so the guide in Buddhism is and in Buddhism means that the guide that is going to show us the roadmap to enlightenment, that is the Buddha. The Buddha has been there. The Buddha is there. The Buddha knows how to get there. And the Buddha has set out that whole path that ordinary human beings need to go, or sentient beings need to go in order to achieve that state. It has all laid out by the Buddha. This is his big gift to this world, that he gave us these teachings explaining us what we need to do in order to develop that state of full enlightenment, so that we are able to help each and every sentient being. So we need to rely upon the Buddha himself. We need to rely upon his teachings, and then we need to rely upon those beings who have been practicing the teachings for a long period of time and have already attained realizations in their own minds. But also we need to rely upon those that might not have the realizations but have heard about the teachings and can share these teachings with us. And we also need to rely upon everyone who is supporting us in our journey. Even if that is someone who, when you are on the run to get here, says, "Oh, I'll give you a coffee for on the way," right? This is our support. But the main support is those who show us where to go. So that is our objects of refuge. So visualize them in the way that you understand what they are. Visualize them in front of you. And then we can take refuge in them. Sangye chedan songye chonamla janchu badu dani kyapsuchi nage janso gipe sonamgi drola penshi sangye drupashu sangye chedan songye chonamla janchu badu dani kyapsuchi nage janso gipe sonamgi drola penshi sangye drupashu sangye chedan songye chonamla janchu badu dani kyapsuchi nage jinso gipe sonamgi drola penshi sangye drupashu. Do we have some tissue here? Tissue. All right. So what we're going to do this morning, maybe we just go a little bit through the program, so that people online also know when to tune in. So we have somewhere a little break in the morning, right? So looking at the time, that break might be around 11:15, and then a short break, and then we start again at 11:30 till 12:30, right? And then after the break, we start again at 2:00. Yeah, and I think I put on the schedule a discussion group, but I'm not sure if we're going to do that, right? So we'll see how we go, because being with very few people who have little knowledge, is very difficult to do discussion groups, unless we're going to talk about something else than the tenets, right? But I think before 12:30, we discuss a little bit with each other what we like to do, and then we go from there. Yeah. Okay. So yesterday we made a start with going through the tenets of the Vaibhashika school, the Great Exposition School, who is seen as the lowest school in Buddhism. It's like the disciples of these schools. They are kind of closely connected with the Indians at that time, with the philosophical systems at that time. So what the Vaibhashikas are very good in, one text that is written from the Vaibhashika point of view that you might have heard of is the Abhidharma Kosha, which is written by Vasubandhu. And in the Abhidharma Kosha, you find whole list about all the delusions, the list with the definitions. You go deeply into karma. What is karma? How does karma work? And they have also an explanation about the whole universe. How is the universe coming into being? How did this world come into being? And how will it be there, for How does it arise and how does it dissolve again? So that is all explained in the Abhidhamma Kosha. It's quite interesting, but it's a bit dry because it has all these lists, so when you study it, you need to memorize all these lists and all these definitions, and it's like this. So Vasubandhu, who was at the beginning of his life a Vaibhashika, he wrote that. Later in his life, he became more a Sautantrika. And so in the Abhidharma Kosha, you find debates coming from the Sautantrika point of view. It's almost like Vasubandhu is debating himself. So he processes things from the Sautantrika point of view, and then the Vaibhashika tries to negate that, say, no, that's not true. It is like this because of this and this and this. So that's very interesting. There are the debates between Sautantrika and Vaibhashika in the Abhidharma Kosha. And so that is one thing that is studied in the monasteries, where you learn not just by, these are their tenets, but you learn to think in their tenets by studying these texts. There's not a big emphasis on that. And, nowadays the geshes, they skip whole chapters because they feel it's not in accordance with reality, not in accordance with how science shows that reality exists. Right, where they talk about the 5 continents, and we are just on one of them, and then it's like, well, where are the other 4? And they talk about Mount Meru being the middle of the world. So what is that? Right. So the science. So then they say, okay, we skip that. I think there is still some value in studying that. It's kind of interesting to know, and what is the actual meaning? What do we know? We only have the appearance of this world, but it's just one appearance that we have. We don't really. Anyway, so just to make that connection with the text that we are studying, I thought that might be helpful. So we have looked into how they define whatever exists. So everything that exists is an object of knowledge. And everything that exists is a thing, and a thing being that which performs a function, or that which has the ability to perform a function. So both permanent things and impermanent things are things. Permanent things, for instance, being uncompounded space. Once we go to the Sautantrika, they say that's not a thing, because they say space cannot perform a function. But Vaibhashika says, yes, it can, because it can allow things to happen. It allows things to happen. So that is how they define. And what we said yesterday is how they see phenomena is that they exist externally, truly, inherently. So it's like there is an objective external world that we perceive, that whatever comes to our eyes and to our mind is just an objective representation of what is outside there. The mind doesn't have any influence on that. Okay, and so then they all the systems, they talk about a conventional truth and an ultimate truth. And we saw that every system defines them in their own way. And every system says the way we define the two truth is that it is free of the extreme of permanence and annihilation. Right? So we're going to go through these two truths from every perspective. Right? So the definition of the conventional truth, and it is on your screen, is a phenomena which is such that if it were to be broken or mentally separated into parts, the mind apprehending it would cease. So for instance, if I have a cup, right, and I look at the cup and I have an image of the cup appearing in my mind, and then I take a hammer and I slash the cup. The moment that I slash the cup, the appearance of cup is gone in my mind. True? The image of a broken cup is in my mind now. Cup is gone. So that means cup is a relative truth. Because when I slash it, then the image in my mind is also gone. Therefore, it doesn't exist truly. It exists, or it doesn't exist ultimately. Sorry, not truly. It doesn't exist ultimately, but it does exist conventionally. So this is their definition. So when we have anything that you can think of, you have a cloth, right? And I can start peeling out all the threads of the cloth. And eventually there is no more cloth left, right? I only have threads. Then the image of the cloth is gone. Then the cloth is gone. So that is therefore a conventional truth. Something to say for that, no? It's like, it depends, right? If it is all put together, it is a thing. But if you rip it apart, it's not there anymore. So that's conventional truth. So then what is ultimate truth? Ultimate truth is when, if it were broken or mentally separated into parts, the mind apprehending that object would not cease. And so then they give examples of directional partless particles, a partless particle. I mean, the definition is a little bit strange. So there are their way of positing ultimate truth is that they say if you break things into pieces, eventually what you end up with is a particle that you cannot break into parts anymore. That is the ultimate truth. And when we think about the mind, I can think about the moments of mind, but I can make that particle so small that I cannot break it anymore. Prasangika would not agree, right? They keep saying, but you can even break that one, right? But they posit this ultimate thing. There is eventually something that you cannot break down. They say temporarily partless moments of consciousness. And also what is ultimate truth is non-compounded objects, right? So all compounded phenomena which come together due to causes and conditions or to, different kinds of substances coming together, you can separate them into parts. But uncompounded phenomena you cannot separate into parts because they don't have parts. So then that is also an ultimate truth according to the Vaibhashika. And so when we can break things into parts and the mind can no longer understand it, then it is a conventionally existent. All other things exist ultimately. So there are not that many things that exist ultimately, right? Only a few things. Most of the things, if we look into all the things that are around us, they are impermanent by nature. They are compounded phenomena. So they're all conventional truth. But their essence, if you completely break it down, they say that is the ultimate truth. So you can see that people are breaking it down right in their mind. I see something, but there is a truth there which I cannot see, but I can think about it, and eventually I come there. But it's very materialistic, right? They go into the matter of things to find the ultimate truth. So, yes.
Radio, that the science try to find this ultimate
This God particle.
Yes.
Take your mic.
Oh.
Yeah. So science tries to find that particle, right? That indestructible particle. But they also must know that things are partless, right? That everything can be divided. Yeah, but they do look for that. Yes.
Yeah, because in the what to say the quantum physics, they were looking for that type, and they say it must be findable.
Yeah, we must find out, right? Yeah. And as Prasangika, he say, you won't be able to find anything. But they do look for that. They do look for that. So we can see all the scientists, which level are they, right? They're quite materialistic. They deny a lot of things that do exist as being non-existent, right? If we think about karma, if we think about past and future lives, doesn't exist. Even consciousness, right? Many scientists, they don't believe in consciousness. So very materialistic, very materialistic. So then where are we going in Buddhism? There, it's like a fantasy to them. What are you talking about? Right? But there are also now scientists coming who do accept that something leaves the body, right, at the time of death. And they're all, and His Holiness has been trying to interest the science in look what happens at the time of death, especially with highly realized lamas who go in meditation, investigate that. Because he thinks once people really get that, you open up such a huge world full of possibilities, also for the science, right? If you get that. So he keeps saying, look into that, look into that. Yeah, but it's very, very slow. The education, right, is, we spoke about that yesterday. There's a lot to say about the education that we give to children and have even in the universities. So that with respect to the ultimate and conventional truth, that's clear, isn't it? Yeah. So then we said a little bit about the times. So all other schools, they say the present moment is a functioning thing, while the past and the future are permanent things. But the Great Exposition School or the Vaibhashika School says no, all three times, past, present, future, are impermanent by nature, and they are functioning things. Yeah. So then we have to think about that. They say that the pot's past is a functioning thing. The past of the pot is a substance even. And the future of the pot is a substance. We would say, well, it hasn't come into existence yet, but somehow they say that does exist. Maybe it does exist in the present moment. I'm not sure how they posit it. So if you're interested in the time and how Buddhists think about time, then you have to go to the Vaibhashika and see what they are positing. I'm not too familiar with that. Did we do this? We didn't do this yet. No, we got to the object possessor. So we have seen the objects. They are external objects that exist objectively, and everything that exists, permanent and impermanent things, have the capacity to perform a function. And then we go to the object possessors. It's like who is observing, who or what is observing the things around us. And so one object possessor is the person itself. So what is the person? What is the person? So we have seen that the lower tenet schools, they refute the self-sufficient, substantially existent self. That doesn't exist. That was one of the 4 seals. They agree upon that. That doesn't exist. So then what is the self? Right? So every Buddhist tenet school has to posit something which illustrates the self, which illustrates the person. Right? If we say, what is a person? What is a person? What we say is a person. Yeah.
Is it the 5 aggregates?
Some people say the 5 aggregates, yeah. So in the Vaibhashika school, there are some people who say it is the 5 aggregates. Some of them say, no, it is the collection of the 5 aggregates. And some of them say, no, it is only the mental consciousness. Right? So there are 3 different positions within the Vaibhashika school. So the meditations that they do is they do a lot on the 4 close placements of mindfulness. Have you heard of that? Where you're mindful of your body, mindful of your breath, mindful of the mind, and mindful of objects. I'm forgetting one. The body, the breath, the feelings, and then the mind, and then the objects, mental objects. So there is a sutra in which the Buddha taught, that you just observe you're walking. And you're not saying I'm walking, but there is the walking is there. The walking is there. Walking. There is just walking. Is there an I who's walking? We say I'm walking. I'm sitting. Who is that I? Right? Who is that I? If that I that appears to be a substance were to exist in us in the way we feel it, we should be able to find it because it feels quite substantial, right? Like there is a substance that we can say that is I. Sometimes it almost feels physical, right? There is something in me that is might be moving around a little bit, but there is definitely something there that is me, right? I know who is me. I know it, but I can feel it, right? But if we're going to look for, then what is that? So these practitioners that are of the Vaibhashika school or the Hinayana practitioners, they look within the five aggregates. What is that I? And they cannot find. They cannot find that. Right? We look into the body, we can't find ourselves. We look into the other four aggregates, which is the feeling, discrimination, then the other compositional factors, which means the other afflictions, but also the virtuous mental factors arise in the mind. All of them, you look into that. Like, is my attachment the me? Is my anger the me? Is my compassion the me? Is my wisdom the me? Where is it? And if I find it in some of them, the witness of all of that, is that the me? Then which moment of that is the me? Right? You look like that, and you feel like there is nothing like that. Right? So they realize the absence of that self. But then you have to say, then what is that self? Right? So some say there are only the five aggregates there. Because I've observed the five aggregates and there is no self. So person is only the five aggregates. Or they say it is the collection of the five aggregates, which means you posit already something outside of the five aggregates, right? Collection, what is then the collection? So there is a problem there when you say that. And then some say it only refers to the mental consciousness, right? So we understand how they posit persons. So that is, persons is one type of object possessor. And then we have consciousnesses. They are another type of object possessor. Right? It's like, what is an object possessor? It is a person or it is a consciousness. It is a knower. Is the knower the self? Right? We make that, but if you're going to think about it, is my knower the self? If I have this feeling of this self that is sitting somewhere, then is that the knower of everything, or is my I consciousness something different than this self? And my consciousness possesses the object, possesses the chair, right? Looks at the chair, in that way possesses the chair. Is it then I possess the chair? Right? It's an object. That sounds a bit funny. So in Buddhism, object possessors are referring to consciousnesses, or they are referring to the self or the person. Right? So we know what the person is in the school, and then we need to look at the consciousnesses. What are the different consciousnesses? And did any of you look into Lorik? You just studied Lorik a little bit? Very good. You know a little bit about Lorik? No? You? So Lorik talks about what kind of consciousnesses do we have? How do we perceive the world? And how do we think? How does the thinking consciousness work? How does the sense perception works? Maybe there is a difference in that. And so then which consciousnesses are valid and which consciousnesses are not valid? Which one can I believe and which one should I challenge? Right? So what kind of types of perception do we have? And in general, they are divided into 7. And we can find that back in all the systems. right? All the systems have these 7 consciousnesses. Although I have not written them down here, do I? No. 7 consciousnesses. I think we get them when we go into the South Tantrika school. But there are minds which are valid with respect to reality, and then there are consciousnesses which are not valid with respect to reality. So, for instance, not valid consciousness. Just a wrong consciousness, right? I have ideas which are not correct. It's a wrong consciousness. It's not valid. How do I know the validity, whether it's valid or not? I have to maybe apply reasoning, or I have to check reality itself, right? So if what I'm wrong about, for instance, I say, I know that at the other side here, there is a bottle of jam on the table. And you say, no, I didn't bring any jam this morning. I say, I'm sure it's there. I've seen it. I've seen it. And you say, no, it's not there. Did you bring the jam this morning? Did you? Did you bring jam this morning? Nine, but I've seen it on the table, right? So then you say, it's not true. Come and have a look. I'll show you, right? So I'm checking whether I'm correct or not with my direct perception. I can see, no, it's not true. I made a mistake. There is no jam there, right? So I can check it like that. But if my mistake is about something that cannot be perceived directly, I might have to use reasoning, right? Or if I'm mistaken with respect to memories, I might have to ask somebody else. Or so there are many different ways that we can check that validity of our perception. But we can see that there are mistaken or wrong consciousnesses, and then invalid consciousnesses and non-valid cognizers. And so, yes, I'm not sure if I should go through all of that. So there are ones that are wrong, there are ones that are correct. Then we have different types of consciousness. Some are connected to our senses. So everything that we can see and hear and feel and taste and smell, these are our 5 senses. And they have a sense consciousness. They are very strong connected to our body, right? They are just from this life, connected to this life. They're coming from the karma and afflictions that triggered the rebirth that we have taken in this body. So having these senses and having the way that we perceive the sensory world is coming from our karma and delusions from past lives. Right? This is what we have. Then we have a mental consciousness. That mental consciousness, there is a coarse mental consciousness and there is a subtle mental consciousness. The coarse one is very much connected to also this life, in the way that we think and the way that we grow up and the way that we believe in things, and maybe the cultural things that we have adopted, right? That is somehow in our coarse mind. And then there is a subtle mind, and that has much more connection with the past, where we are coming from. And sometimes that starts to wake up. We start to connect with that more subtle mind. Before, for instance, when we do things like yoga or tai chi or meditation, or we are trying to connect with that subtle body and mind, right? And so when that wakes up, suddenly we might maybe have some things coming to us that we think, that's strange, that doesn't really look like me, but it feels very much like me. It's like a new aspect of me that I didn't know before, right? So maybe you go to a country, right, like Tibet, and you are there and you have the feeling you recognize something, or maybe you feel inside that you want to cry, or maybe you are overwhelmed by emotions. And you think, what's that? I've never been here. Why, right? So, but there is something in you waking up, and that's more connected to your subtle mental consciousness that wakes up, that is there, but you haven't been able to reach that because the domain of our daily life is only on that course level, right? Sometimes little children, they say things that you think, where's that coming from? I worked with little kids, and they are telling kind of stories that you think, what are you talking about? This is not this life. You're talking about something else, or you have knowledge that cannot come from this life. They say sometimes something so true. How do you know that? So they are more in contact with that subtle mind. It's almost like sometimes some memories from the past, they are shining through, and they pick that up, and they come from that place, right? So when you are a mother who doesn't know anything about that, you say, "Oh, you are just joking, aren't you? You're just making it up. You're just making it up." But that child might actually say something from his or her experience, right? So that is the subtle mind. Then after 4, 5, 6 years, that subtle mind, the children go to school, they have to learn everything. They learn to use that coarse mind more, and whatever was coming from the subtle mind somehow gets covered up. They can't access it anymore. And you hear something similar with the young tulkus, right? When they're very young, they recognize students. But when they're older, that is gone. That recognition is gone because the coarse mind is taking over. But that subtle mind, we can develop that when we meditate, and we can develop that and connect with that when we do exercises like, the yoga and the Tai Chi and that kind of things. Yoga Tai Chi doesn't develop the mind, but it develops the subtle body that is strongly connected with the subtle mind. So when we develop the subtle body, also the connection with the subtle mind starts to come to life, right? But with meditation, we develop the subtle mind, and then the subtle body might follow that, right? So when you meditate a lot, you might feel that you are more easy in your body, that you can stretch better, that you can, these kind of things, that you can concentrate better. These things happen more easily. So with the meditation, you learn how to control the winds. With the exercises that we're doing, we learn to control the winds, but you not necessarily control with that the mind, because when the mind gets out of control, you always have to go back to your exercises, right? Oh, my mind is out of control, I have to do my yoga. But you have no tools in the mind to deal with that. So there's just a difference. Why do I talk about that subtle? So that's the subtle mind. So we have sense perception and we have mental perception. And then when we develop the mind, at a certain point, we can, the mental perception normally comes, the way that our brain works, no, not our brain, our mental consciousness works is by way of conceptions, right? When we think, the way that we access the topic that we're thinking about is not because we see it, but because we think about it, we have some kind of image in our mind, right? This is a conception. True? You have an image in your mind and there is a name. And we know that that image and the name, they are what we say suitable to be mixed. So the mind accesses its object by way of a conception, not directly. True? If I close my eyes and I think about chair, I can only access an image of the chair in my mind. I cannot access the chair how it is in reality. I need something in order to be able to see the chair, right? That comes in my mind. When I look with my eyes, I don't need that because my eye can see directly the chair. But my mental consciousness cannot see directly the chair. So it works through conceptions.
But it is not the same chair. It's something.
But it's an image of the chair. It's not a chair itself. Right? It's not a chair itself at all. At all. Completely different. We often mix them up. Right? That we believe that what is in my mind is the same as there. And that's absolutely not true, but we believe it, right? But I can access a representation of the chair in my mind with an image, but it's not the chair. No, not. And it's very important to see that difference, right, between these. I mean, it's just a different mind and it works in a completely different way. And when we understand that really, really, really well, then we can also understand more and more the emptiness, you know. So later today and tomorrow we will highlight this. You put a disco on. Something is happening. And so then there is another valid. Is it okay now? Thank you, thank you. So then when we start developing our mind with that mental consciousness at a certain point, for instance, I want to think and realize the impermanence of things, not just the coarse impermanence, but the subtle impermanence, the changing that happens moment to moment in each and every impermanent object. So I can realize that I need to realize that with my mental consciousness, because my eye cannot see the impermanence, right? So I need to use reasoning and I need to meditate upon it. And then first I can realize that impermanence by way of having a correct conception that kind of represents the impermanence of things. And then if I meditate very strongly on that conception, at a certain point, that conception can drop away. And I can see it directly with my mind. This is called a yogic direct perceiver. And the yogic direct perceiver is a type of consciousness that we want to develop with respect to reality. So when we talk about the selflessnesses of persons, of phenomena, when we talk about things like impermanence, we want to develop a mental consciousness that has the capacity to see that object without a conception, directly. Does that make sense? Just going to see if
So
Petra got it.
You kind of try to get. Oh, sorry. So you can try to get your mind kind of in the form of reality somehow.
Yeah, exactly.
So you do until you kind of get on the same level of reality.
Yeah, so first you see reality as it is, but you still see it through a conception. So first you need to somehow get to that conception. And you get to that conception by way of reasoning, right? And by way of thinking about it. So that conception is there. Thank you. That conception is there when we have that exactly in accordance with reality, right? It's not reality itself, but it is a representation that is representing what is there. And then I have a very strong concentration and I concentrate on that conception. At a certain point, it drops away and I can see it directly. And so what we are trying to do until we are there is we try to make our own conceptions or develop our own conceptions in a way that they become in accordance with reality. Right? Because when they become in accordance with reality, we are much more in touch with reality. And when we are in touch with reality, what we let go of is the drama that we add to reality, right? Which is all our reactions coming from attachment and aversion. They start to drop away, right? So they first have to go. So then the mind becomes more peaceful. And when the mind is more peaceful, we can go to more subtle states, right? And we have stronger concentration. And then with that, we develop that correct conception. And then we need to, when the correct conception is there, the mind even becomes more peaceful. Because when we see things in accordance with reality, we are not disturbed anymore. We are disturbed because we have expectations from reality which are not in accordance with reality. And then reality is not functioning in accordance with my expectations. And so I get upset. How is this possible? But if I know reality, then when things happen, I think, yeah, because things are like that. I know it. Right? So when we drop our expectations, which means when we drop our projections, when we drop the things that we believe about reality, which in actuality do not exist, the mind already becomes much more peaceful. True. So so when we study, this is what I mentioned yesterday. One of the benefits of studying the nature of reality, whether you do that through tenets, or whether you do that through the Madhyamika, whether you do that through the Abhisamaya, it all brings the mind more in line with reality as it is. And so just going through the study, you constantly realign yourself. And so when we study that a day after day after day, you create a familiarity with bringing your mind in line with reality, right? And at a certain point, it starts kind of sticking there. And when it starts sticking there, it's like you get so much more freedom because the delusions, they do not come up in the way they came up before. They drop away because you have trained your whole mind, your thinking mind, in how things are, right? And you might not have that 100% clear or firm, but the fact that you have gone through it has already changed something in your mind, has already brought it more in accordance with reality. Right? So that's very precious in doing this. I feel that's the main thing that the study is doing, making us more real, more real, more in accordance with how we actually are. All right. Any questions? Oh, good.
Ja. Ob das auch, ich habe natürlich zurück zur Yoga und Tai Chi, ob das ist auch das von Niederwerfungen,
Prostrations.
Auch das subtile Geist, das kann man weg.
So with the prostrations, there's a purification practice, right? That you do physically. So but not only physically, you also do that mentally. So I think when you do the prostrations, you are purifying your energy system, also the more subtle energies. And then when you take refuge and when you do the prostrations and you do the praises and you do the 35 Buddhas, you also purify your mind, right? So you do both, body and mind. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, yeah. Also, the yoga has sometimes things related to the mind, right? Where they teach things about the mind. But it's not the foremost thing to do. It's about the body. And when the body is a proper vehicle, Yeah, the mind is calm. Yeah, and you can direct the mind more easy. Yes, that is all there, but then you don't know what to do with that. You have this great capacity, and you cannot use it to its. You don't use it to its fullest extent, I think. But it's my personal thinking. I know that some people who do yoga, they might be very upset when you say that. I don't want to make anyone upset. So in Buddhism at the beginning, I don't know if you guys had that, you start to listen to the teachings and you start to practice and you have all these things happening in your body that you feel you need to, something is not sitting happy in your body. And then at a certain point it goes and you feel, oh, it's gone now. It's like somehow working with the mind has made that you have let go something of the body or something has purified in your body. So just by doing it with the mind, you can do that with the body. I think in the West, we should do both. We should do both, because we have access to that. And I also think that the way that we are living is not as healthy as people were in Tibet. In Tibet, they just use the mind. But they have been using the mind for generations. And when you use the mind for generations, it will influence your DNA, it will influence your offspring. It does, the effect of doing the mantras, they say, has influence for 7 generations, right? So you have that, they have all that, they come with all that. We don't have that. So I think we are very much benefited by also using the body in trying to develop our mind. It's a great support that makes it more easy. All right. Say a little bit more. The mode of asserting selflessness. So what is that selflessness? We talk about, when we talk about tenets, you hear about selflessness of persons, and sometimes you hear about selflessness of phenomena. And in some traditions, and we see that later, there is a huge difference. And some there is also a difference, but not as huge. So every tenet system posts things differently. The Vaibhashika, they only talk about the selflessness of persons. They say that the self of phenomena, that does exist, right? Things exist truly as they are. What I see is an objective representation. So that's the self of phenomena that exists. It's just there. I can see it. But that self of persons, by investigating these 5 aggregates, they can see, oh, that self is not there. So that is the selflessness of persons. They only have that. So when they talk about selflessness in the Vaibhashika, they talk about selflessness of persons, nothing else. Right? For them, that is the same meaning.
But you said they say the self is the aggregate.
Some say the self is the aggregates, or is any of the aggregates.
So how can they say self is the aggregate and this is also selfless?
They are selfless in the sense that the self-sufficient substantially existent self, that doesn't exist. They don't say self doesn't exist, but the self is not that. So then what is the self? The self is one of the aggregates, or the mental consciousness, or all of the aggregates, or the collection of the aggregates. But there is no separate substance which is self-sufficient, which is controlling the aggregates, something like that. That is not there. That is the selflessness. Right? So we negate a self, but it doesn't mean there is no self at all, right? Because I talk about myself the whole time. Myself, right? There is a self there, but not the way I believe it is. The Buddha talks about himself. The Buddha never says, I have no self. He does say that, but you need to know, what does the Buddha actually mean when he says, I have no self? Is there no self at all? No Buddhist tenet says there is no self at all. We are not walking around here. There is no self, no self. This is nihilism. This is, you negate too much. There is a self, and we have to take care of that self. But the way we do that needs to be in accordance with reality. Right? And we make things up that are not there, which are not in accordance with reality. That's our problem. So what is it that we're making up? And what is really there? Really there in the sense that it exists, right? How it exists then can be very, very subtle, but it still exists because it can talk about it. Right? So this is the trick. This is finding the middle way. What do I let go of, and what stays? All right. And so then there are little exceptions. So within any tenet system, we find groups, right? And so there are groups that say a little bit different. And I'm not going to go into all of these because it's just going to be confusing. We're just going to go through the main topics. So we arrive at the presentation of grounds and path, which means grounds and path means at a certain point, the practitioner develops that realization, I want to become free from samsara. And in order to be able to do that, I'm going to attain liberation. So they develop renunciation, the mind of renunciation. And when that mind of renunciation is uncontrived, which means when it is spontaneously present 24 hours a day, when it is all the time in the mind, the person enters into the path. And the path has, up to the point that they achieve their liberation, is divided into 5 bits. And this is actually in all the systems, all the tenet systems, the same. The 5 paths, the way they are called, is the same. So the first path is the path of accumulation, in which you listen a lot to the teachings, in which you practice the wisdom of hearing. You listen to the teachings and you start to apply yourself to the meditations. And then the next path is the path of preparation. And the path of preparation, you have a union of calm abiding and special insight, in which you have a mind that can, and it is not everywhere in the Vibhashika, there are exceptions, right? But in general, it's like that. You have a union of calm abiding and special insight. So the mind can focus single-pointedly and then analyzes the object, which is the self, right? I'm holding on to the self. Does that really exist in the way that I believe it exists? Does it really exist as a separate entity from my body and my mind? And then at a certain point, I come to that realization that it is not there, but due to the union of calm abiding and special insight, it is, we have that perfect conception first on the path of preparation. And at a certain point, that concentration is so strong that that conception drops. That moment we enter into what we say the path of seeing, where you see the truth directly. And then after having seen the truth directly, you need to familiarize with that truth. So you have to go into that meditative equipoise again and again and again, meditating on that emptiness again and again, making it stronger again and again. And that is called the path of meditation, where we familiarize. And then eventually that realization is so strong that it has slowly removed all the obscurations, which are the conceptions that believe there is a self, the conception that holds on to that self. We need to remove them from the mind, right? We have coarse levels and then more subtle levels, all they need to be removed. So we need to make that realization of the selflessness so strong that it has the capacity to remove all these obscurations. So that we do in the path of meditation, and then at a certain point. Ta-da! All done. And then we are liberated, right? We are liberated from that. So these 5 paths, path of accumulation, where we accumulate merit and where we listen to the teachings, then the path of preparation, where we engage in the meditation and develop that union of calm abiding, that realization that we have in that, we make it stronger and stronger. Then from that, we go into the path of seeing, where we can see the truth directly. Then we familiarize with that, and then we achieve the result. These 5 paths we can find back in all the systems. How the practitioner goes through the path, there is a difference, right? Some say, for instance, we go to that later. We go to that later. Have you heard about these 5 paths? Yeah. Good. So I think we make a little break and then we come back in 15 minutes and we talk about what needs to be abandoned on that path, right? Because we need to purify the mind of something. What is that in this system? We know what is realized and what is it that we need to remove, and then how does the practitioner go through the path? You know? Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Perfect. So should we wait for Thank you. Wait for. So in the Vaibhashika school, what we have arrived at is at the objects of abandonment and the actual presentation of grounds and path. So all the schools agree that we are holding on to something that in actuality doesn't exist. And in order to become liberated, we need to become liberated from believing that what we hold on to is true. We need to, and in order to do that, we need to realize the opposite of that. So if I hold on to a self,
Christian, hörst du mich? Jetzt höre ich.
Excuse me. Put in your...
Okay, danke.
Okay. So we hold on to that self of persons, and that self of persons obscures us from seeing reality as it is, because the reality as it is that there is not such a self. Okay. So we holding on to something that in actuality doesn't exist obscures us from seeing that reality. In order to become liberated, we need to realize that reality. So that means that that thing that we believe in needs to be removed, right? So that we have clear sight onto the nature of reality. So how do we remove that? By developing a mind that is totally opposite of that. And when I have that mind that is totally opposite, that knows there is not such a self, that one can drop away, right? If I believe there is a thermos here on the table, when I see that there is not a thermos, that idea that there is a thermos is gone. Right? I'm sure there was a thermos here. Or here, there is a thermos there. And then I said, oh no, there is no thermos. The moment I see that there is no thermos, my belief that there is a thermos is gone. I'm not thinking, yeah, I just saw that, but maybe there still is one, right? Even if I saw it's not there, maybe there is. No, when I see it, I know it, right? So the seeing of the truth makes it is so strong. The seeing of the truth is so strong that holding on something that is not true cannot stay in the mind. It's like it's gone, right? So that is the realization of that selflessness. And so that realization has a capacity to remove obscurations that are associated by that thing that we were holding on to. So if I hold on to the self, independence on that self, my attachment arises, my anger arises, my jealousy, my pride, all the afflictive obscurations that afflict the mind, that disturb the mind, they arise, independence on that self. So the moment I realize there is not such a self, I take out the reason why these afflictions could arise. Right? So then whatever they have created in my mind, I need to kind of clean up. I need to clean up. Right? So this is what we do when we go through the path. From the path of seeing the truth, and then we familiarize with that truth. We are removing what we call the afflictive obscurations, the obscurations that afflict the mind, that are associated with that self that we believe to exist, and now know that that doesn't exist in the way it appeared to us. So we start to removing these. So afflictive obscurations are connected to that holding on to the self, and then in the system there are also non-afflictive obscurations, which are, for instance, the latencies or the imprints that are coming, that are associated with the afflictive obscurations, but they themselves are not afflictions. For instance, I'm not sure how they posit that in the Vaibhashika, but imprints can be the appearance of. It's like I have a pot of garlic and there is garlic in it, and I take the garlic out because it smells so bad. And although all the garlic is out, the pot is still smelling like garlic, right? So although all the afflictions have been removed, there is still some kind of leftover that doesn't disturb the mind, but it is still a leftover of that afflictive obscuration. It is a non-afflictive obscuration. That obscuration doesn't afflict the mind. It doesn't disturb the mind, but there is still something.
So I have they to be removed.
They don't remove that.
If
They don't remove that in the system. They don't remove that. But if we're going to think about, I want to remove all the obscurations and become a Buddha, then also that needs to be removed. Right? But they, in order to achieve their result, they don't have to remove that. Only the afflictive obscurations. And so then how do they travel through the path? And if we talk about disciples traveling through the path, then in general we talk about three types of disciples. One is called the hearer, one is called the solitary realizer, and one is called the bodhisattva. So the hearer and the solitary realizers, they both strive for their own liberation, while the bodhisattva is working for their enlightenment in order to be of benefit to all sentient beings, right? So they have a different motivation. They three go through the 5 path, but because the hearer goes for their own liberation in a very limited way, they just do that what is needed to be free of samsara. They go in a different way in the sense that they don't need so much merit in order to achieve their result. The solitary realizer needs a little bit of more merit than the hearer, and then the bodhisattva needs a huge amount of merit in order to achieve their goal, right? So these 3 beings, hearers are beings who mainly gather in groups, and then they listen to the teachings. And they might even hear Mahayana teachings, and they might even talk about the Mahayana teachings to others, but for themselves, they're not interested in that, right? They want just to be liberated from samsara. So they listen a lot to the teachings, and they move in groups. So until their last life, before they attain liberation, they are in groups. Then you have the solitary realizer, who might be in groups or might be more on their own. So there are different types of solitary realizers. So even if they are in groups, in their last life, what they have in common is that they all do their last life on their own, without a teacher. Right? So to be able to do that last life, where you need to remove the most subtle obscurations, to do that on your own, you need a kind of some qualities that the hearer doesn't have, right? You need to have some independency that the hearer doesn't have. So they need more merit in order to be able to do that. Solitary realizers, they kind of also like to teach others. But when they teach, they often lose their concentration, So what they do is they teach through their body language or from mind to mind. So they perform activities that they don't have to speak, right? Because the speaking makes that the mind gets disturbed, but they can make movements with the body that doesn't disturb the mind, and then somehow the people understand what they are teaching. So they can teach impermanence like that, they can teach selflessness like that. So their realization, in order to have that capacity, they say is more profound than the realization of the hearer, although they realize that same selflessness of persons. So it becomes more profound because they have more merit. And so then they have a greater capacity to realize in the last life to be without a teacher, and then in order to be able to teach others. And then we have the Bodhisattvas, and these are the beings who work for the benefit of others. And so from the beginning of their Bodhisattva path, they are already working for the benefit of others in order to create merit so that their merit is so substantial that it has a capacity to remove all the obscurations that are needed in order to achieve their result. Right? So these are three vehicles. And in this system, all three are mentioned. So the hearer, he only needs to have a small collection of merit. And after 3 lifetimes of practicing, they already attain their nirvana. And we think, wow, that's attractive. The solitary realizer, they need a middling portion of merit or collection of merit. And they say they practice for 100 eons to attain their enlightenment. So that's very different, right? 3 lifetimes or 100 eons is a huge difference. And so then the Bodhisattva realizes the same, but then needs at least 3 countless great eons of merit to attain their enlightenment. And so then the way that you collect merit is also different. And I'm just gonna read that a little bit. Oh, it's not on the screen yet. Bodhisattvas have collected merit for 3 countless great eons. Is it on the screen?
Yes.
Yes. On the great stage of the path of accumulation and below. So on the path of accumulation, we can divide it into three path of accumulation. So they develop the merit on that path. Then they attain the state of the path of preparation. The heat stage is the first part of the path of preparation. And then they go into meditation, and then they go all the way up to enlightenment in one session. Right? This is their presentation. This is not everywhere presented like that. The solitary realizer, after having accumulated 100 great eons, also on that path of accumulation, then when they attain that path of preparation, they enter the path of preparation on the heat level, they enter into that, and then they go on in one session to the path of normal learning. And then the heroes, they collect merit on all 4 learning paths, which means the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, the path of seeing, and the path of meditation. And It is necessary to train, for some, it is necessary to train on that learning path, even for up till 14 lifetimes after attaining superior path. Oh, so 14 lifetimes on the path of accumulation and the path of preparation. It takes them 14 lifetimes. So the 3 lifetimes is for the sharp faculty hearer. And then you have more dull practitioners, like maybe I won't say that. No, we have to say we are sharp faculty, right? To access that quality that maybe we have in our mind. So when you have a sharp faculty practitioner, they go faster. The dull ones, they go slower. So it can take up to many more lifetimes than the 3 of a hearer. Yes.
Why would somebody choose to go the solitary realizes path?
Nicht gut.
Cautious.
Ja.
Why
But she can't hear it. You have a problem?
cautious.
Yeah.
Why would somebody choose to go to solitary realizes path if the hearer's path is so much more short?
So why would we go on the Bodhisattva path?
Yeah, but that's there I see the difference.
Because
On the other, because of benefiting the sentient beings. But solitary realizes and hearers are both on the Hinayana path.
Sure.
So what is the difference in the result for them?
I mentioned that, right? You remember?
No?
So the difference between the hearer and the solitary realizer is that the solitary realizer also teaches others the Dharma, not through speaking. They can do it through speaking, but that disturbs their mind. But they do it also through body movements, right? So they have a kind of affinity. To me, they look like these wandering souls that go through life on their own, right? They take that path into the mountains, and you think, where are they going? And they just have something to do, and they have this affinity of doing it in that way, right? But then they also like coming back and then showing you what they have learned, right? Well, the hearer is much more simple. Very careful in how I say that. In that because you see, Lama Zopa would say you still remove the suffering for one sentient being from the mind, which is incredible. But they don't think about I go on my own. They just want to stay in the group, and they do everything with the group. And then they, at a certain point, they achieve their enlightenment, and then they stay in their meditation, and then that's it.
But the solitary realize, well, the end point is nirvana for both.
Yeah.
So in this sense, is there a difference?
State of nirvana is the state that is free from all the obscurations or from the afflictive obscurations. In that sense, there is no difference. But in their capacity to do something with that, there is a difference. Right? But you could say there is no difference between, if we go a little bit further in the text, there is no difference between the realization of emptiness of the hearer, of the solitary realizer, and of the Bodhisattva. What's the difference? There's no difference in the realization of emptiness.
Yeah, but as you said, you have removed, the Bodhisattva has removed at the end even the subtle obscurations.
Why would you do that?
But there is also a difference when they're in the subtleness of their minds or capacity, or
I think there is the difference in their own affinity, their own interest, their own capacity, right? So the solitary realizer is a being of greater capacity than the hearer. You want to do something with that capacity, right? You have this great capacity, I said, just don't use it. If you just clean the floor here is good enough. You don't have to be director. You don't have to do the bowls. You don't have to do any of that. If you just clean the floor is good enough. How would you feel?
Maybe happy.
Maybe happy.
Less problems.
Less problems for sure. But you're not saying let me clean the floor. You also kind of enjoy doing the other things, even if it comes with problems. We like to live up to our potential, no? To our capacity. If we are under-asked, we don't like it, right?
Mm.
You don't see what I actually could do for you. I can do so much for you. Why would I not develop that potential? Just because I have the same state, but I like to do that. I think it's something like that.
But let's say that they work for the nirvana. No?
Yes.
So I go, okay, I want to liberate myself. That's my goal.
And I do that by going through the path, and I do that the way I like to go through my path.
So this is just, but it's only the difference is only on the past. It's not in the end. At the result is the same. No?
Well, and then when they have achieved their result, they can do something different with that, right? Solitary realizer can teach in a way that the hearer cannot. The hearer can repeat what he or she has heard, but cannot teach from their own experience in the same way as the solitary realizer can.
Okay.
And why? 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 What do you mean why? Because they created so much more merit. When we have merit makes that whatever potential is there can come to fruition, can manifest. Right, all the qualities that we have are coming from merit. All the qualities that we have coming from merit. So when we are together, there are some that are good in this, some that are good in that. Different merit, but both comes from merit. And then there are people, no matter what they touch, things fall out of their hands, no merit. Not even the merit to hold the knife. Right? It can be like that. No merit. Your intelligence comes from merit, comes from things that you have done in the past. Your being good in handicraft comes from merit. Your being good in anything performing comes from merit. You having a beautiful voice comes from merit. You having a beautiful body comes from merit. You never being sick comes from merit. Right? We have created that merit in the past. So that makes a difference. When you see people without merit, it's like no matter what they try, it's not working. They don't maybe even have the idea that they can try, and then how they can try, and it's like it's not coming. No merit. There are people who have themselves very low capacity. I don't know, take a dog, right? Dog is born, they themselves cannot do much, but then they have the great merit that they find someone who is taking care of them. Right? So they don't have the merit to develop their own capacity, for instance, in studying and whatever, doing the Dharma, but they do have the merit of having found someone, or having arrived, or having ended up in a family where they take really good care of them, maybe even exposed to the Dharma, maybe, right? It's like, wow, that dog has a lot of merit. Not the merit to be born as a human being. They did not have that merit. They got born as a dog, but then they have this incredible, what they call the completion karma. Yeah, it's or the environmental karma. All of that. It's like the conditions are fantastic. Right? There are cats who inherit millions from their owners when the owners die. Right? They have all that merit, and I think, wow, that seed has ripened. It's not going to come back in your next life. Here, that seed has ripened while you are a cat. You can't do anything with it. How long did you work for that seed? And then it's gone. Right? So
Still, I have this question about when you. I hear that you when you're in nirvana, then you just are blissed out. Are you still active?
it depends.
Oh, it depends.
Depends. Solitary realizers, they can walk around and they can teach with their body language whilst staying in their concentration. But when they speak, they lose the concentration.
So when they already in the nirvana.
So yeah, when we talk about the heroes and solitary realizers and the Hinayana Sangha, there is a presentation on what we call the 20 Sangha, which explains how they go from once they enter into the path of seeing, how many times they have to come back to the desire realm and what they need to do, in order to not come back to desire realm anymore, but then they are in the higher realms, in the form realm and in the formless realms, in these levels of concentration that we can develop in the mind. They are there. And so they can have the state of a once returner, someone who has to come one more time back to the desire realm before they become a non-returner. When they're non-returners, they don't come back to the desire realm, but they are in the higher realms, and they can develop their mind further, until they attain that state of nirvana. And once they have attained the state of nirvana, because they have been cutting the karma and delusions, which was the cause of taking rebirth in the desire realm, and also in samsara, they're cutting that. Once they have attained liberation, there's no way that they can come back. Because they cut all the causes for being reborn in samsara, they cut them. So there you are in the bliss. And some schools, they say, that moment that you attain liberation, you actually sever your continuum. And that's it. Then you're liberated. And then there are lots of debates. But if you sever the continuum, then who's liberated? There is nobody there anymore to be liberated. So there's a lot of discussion. What actually happens? There are some. I think it's the Prasangika and the Svatantrika school. They say that once you have achieved that state of liberation and you're sitting somewhere in that nirvana in a higher realm, at a certain point the Buddha comes and knocks on your door and says, "Hello, you have not completely fulfilled your own purpose and also the purpose for others. Please come out of that meditation and start working for the benefit of others." Right? So then eventually they have to come out of that meditation and they have to start developing bodhicitta mind so that they can enter into the path of the Bodhisattva, into the Mahayana path, and then follow the Mahayana path all the way up to Buddhahood. But they're so attached to their bliss, right? So although they try to generate that mind that wishes to work for the benefit of sentient beings, they also regularly go into the bliss, and then the Buddha has to come and say, no, out. Right? The benefit of sentient beings. And then they try, but they have so much familiarity with that bliss, that it's very, very difficult to engage in the Bodhisattva path. And so it takes them a long time because they're constantly distracted by the bliss. Right? They have created habits that are obstacles on the Bodhisattva path. So when we talk about the Hinayana path, we can think, oh, this is actually quite attractive because when I'm liberated, I will be better able to help others maybe. If I'm not suffering that much, I might be better able to help others. So why don't I do that for myself? And then I help others. But the problem is that once we do that for ourselves, it's so fantastic to be in that bliss that we do not want to work for others. We don't want to come out of that. Right? And so then it becomes an obstacle. And so what we are advised is don't go there, and don't go there. Go straight into the Bodhisattva path. Take on that responsibility from the beginning. That is really the fastest way that you can go to that state where you have developed all your qualities and where you can help sentient beings to the best of your capacity. So that's the advice. All right. And look a little bit at, so there is a whole lot of knowledge about the enjoyment body and but I think we're going to skip that, because otherwise, these are details that we need to know a lot of knowledge in order to understand the details. I think too much for one weekend, too much. So we know a little bit, right? The Vaibhashika school. These are the ones that like to categorize everything. These are sometimes you see people walking around, right? They have these lists in their mind. This exists out of this and this and this and this, and this exists like this and this and this and this and that, and they categorize their world and they walk around, and that is the way they live life. Right? This is a little bit of Vaibhashika school, I think. They have some features that are interesting compared to the Prasangika. I put that in your mind for a later point in time. So when you do that, you can do interesting debates between Prasangika and Vaibhashika. And then it's quite difficult for the Prasangika even to defeat the Vaibhashika. Also, there are Indian schools which are very difficult to defeat for Prasangika. So it's not that these are having what they're saying is coarse and the Prasangika is subtle. No, they're saying very clever things that are very difficult to debate, right? So when you go more into details, you can find these points. Just as that we don't think these are the lower schools, we don't have anything. No, there is a lot there, that we can learn. All right. Vaibhashika school. Any questions about Vaibhashika? We have a little bit of idea, huh? Are we ready to hear a little bit about the next school? Which is the Sautantrika. Or do we need to do some exercises to create some space in our mind? Sautantrika. Sautantrika, if we look into the Buddhist texts, I think yesterday I mentioned, right? We study all these schools, but also studying texts that are written from their perspective. So all the text on awareness and knowers and the lyric is coming from the Sautantrika school, which is a lower tenet school. It's a Hinayana school. And they're very good again into categorizing. This is this, this is this, this is that. Also, the Sautantrika believes in that objectivity of external objects. They are just there. So when they posit selflessness, they also only posit selflessness of persons, not selflessness of phenomena, because external phenomena exist objectively. So there's nothing to see, does it exist ultimately or not? It's like that is not the place where you need to do. I need to understand something. You have to look inside. You have to look for that self that you're holding on to. That self-sufficient, substantially existent self. That's what they're interested in. So we go through these 7 points that we did in the Vaibhashika school, starting with the definition, which is a person who propounds Hinayana tenets and accepts both self-cognizers and external objects. And yesterday we mentioned the self-cognizer, right? Which is a consciousness that remembers that you saw something, or that a consciousness that observes, that eye consciousness observes an object. They're kind of attached with each other. And so that self-cognizer is there so that you can remember the object independent upon that consciousness, but you can also remember the experience of having observed that chair, because you have a self-cognizer that is observing the eye consciousness, right? So when I experience something, I experience drinking water, then I need to remember that I drank the water. I need to remember the water, having seen the water or felt the water, something, a consciousness needs to have observed the water. But I also need to remember the consciousness of drinking, or I need to remember the drinking of the water, the experience of drinking the water. And that memory comes from a consciousness that observing my sense consciousness drinking the water. Right? So you know how they are. So here's the object, here's the sense consciousness, and here's the self-cognizer. The sense consciousness observes the object, and the self-cognizer is observing the sense consciousness. Because if I have the sense consciousness, I remember the object. And because I have the self-cognizer, I remember the subject, I remember my experience of this. They say when I don't have a self-cognizer, I cannot remember the experience. So this is what they believe. Vaibhashika says, no, they do not exist. They say it exists. We see later, some schools hold on to they exist, some schools say they do not exist. If we say the self-cognizer does not exist, we need to find a way to posit memory of the experience. Where is that coming from, right? So then schools come up with ideas where they're coming from. So within the South Tantrika, there are two divisions. One is what follows scripture, and one is what follows reasoning. So those who follow scriptures are those who follow the Abhidharma Kosha. And those who follow reasoning are those who follow the treatises on valid cognition, which is, for instance, the Pramanavartika, written by Dharmakirti. That is a South Tantrika text of those following reasoning. And so these South Tantrikas, they are called like that because they follow the sutras of the Buddha. And they are also called exemplifiers because they like to explain all phenomena by means of examples. I cannot explain you more what that means. But they follow strictly the sutras. They read the sutras and then they say, this is what the Buddha said, this is what the Buddha said. And so then we look into that, how do they see existence? How do they see existence? So they say whatever exists is that which is observed by a valid cognizer. So because they are connected to this Lorik text, that all is about valid cognizers and non-valid cognizers. So in order to understand what they mean, whatever exists is that which is observed by a valid cognizer, we have to go to their text. Right? So later we go a little bit into these cognizers. That which is observed by a valid cognizer. So then we need to know what makes that cognizer valid, right? And what is a cognizer? And whatever is observed by that valid cognizer exists. And so there are two divisions of existence, which is the conventional truth and the ultimate truth, which we find back in all the tenet schools. There is a conventional truth and an ultimate truth. The ultimate truth is a phenomenon that is able to perform a function ultimately. So all functioning things, all impermanent things, all compounded phenomena, all products, they're all mutually inclusive, they all refer to the same phenomena. They are all ultimate truth, which means that they say whatever we are seeing here, that's all ultimate truth. Right? It's like the opposite. What are you talking about? This is ultimate truth. But that's what they say. And then they say conventional truth is a phenomenon that is not able to perform a function ultimately. And so what that refers to is permanent phenomena, and they call generally characterized phenomena, falsely established phenomena. All that has the same meaning. And so we leave that for now a little bit. I think the main thing is that when we see that, everything that functions is according to them truly existent in the sense that it's ultimate truth. Right? It's like an objective. They exist objectively. They exist ultimately. They have this capacity to perform a function. And then there are things that cannot perform functions. For instance, I have a division of something. I have a division of consciousnesses. That division itself is a conventional truth that doesn't exist ultimately. Because I've made that up. Right? But this is real. This is ultimate truth. Okay. Are you familiar with affirming negatives and non-affirming negatives? Little bit. You have space in your mind for me to say something about that? Mm-hmm. Okay, you can say no. So there are two types of negatives. Negative means that you realize that something is not there. Right? I think I have 50 Swiss franc in my wallet, and I open my wallet and it's not there. It's not there. That is a non-affirming negation. I only realize that something is not there, but it doesn't imply anything. It's just not there. So when I realize the lack of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self, or maybe in this system there is something there, but definitely in the other system it's not there. It's just not there. It doesn't imply anything. When I realize something is not there, but by realizing that it implies something else, that is called an affirmative negation. For instance, I say that the fat man is not eating at night. If you have an image of the fat man not eating at night, is that just a negation, or do I imply something? Right? By calling that man fat, you must think, well, he must eat during the day because he got fat from something. Right? So that is an affirming negation. That fat man does not eat. Does not eat negates that he's not eating at night. That's the negation. Saying that he's fat implies something. Right? So that affirms something. So there is a negation there, but then something else is affirmed. right? So that is an affirming negation. When you go into debate text, it is a lot about negatives, you know. It's a lot about negatives. It's very, very difficult. It has something to do with how the conceptual mind works. So if I see something with my eye consciousness, I see a positive. I see a chair, I see a cup, I see things. They are positives. They are appearing as something. With my eye consciousness, I do not realize the lack of something. That is a mental process, right? I cannot see the elephant that is not there. I cannot see that. But I can understand the absence of elephant by using my eye consciousness. But the eye consciousness is not the one who is not seeing. The eye consciousness only sees, only has affirmative consciousnesses, right? They see something. If I think about something as not being there, that's an activity of my mental consciousness. So when we are talking about the self that is there, or that we believe is there, that should be a positive phenomenon. And then we realize that self is not there, that is a negative phenomenon, right? The selflessness is a negative phenomenon. So the way our mind works is that when we use our senses, we engage in a positive way with that object. But when I use my conceptual mind, my mental consciousness, if I want to think about that chair, the way that my mind does that is it eliminates everything that is not chair. So we say my senses work by way of collecting the information that is there. It is a collective engager. All the information that is coming from cup is perceived by my eye consciousness. I might not all be aware of it, but it is coming to my eye consciousness from the side of the cup. All that information is coming. But then I think cup, and that is called the thought, or the conceptual mind is called an eliminative engager. So the conceptual mind engages with the cup by eliminating everything that is not cup. Right? Only cup appears, right? Or only, if I think about green cup, is the conception of green cup different from the conception of cup? Different, right? Different conception. So that conception of green cup eliminates more than the conception of cup. Right? What is the conception of green cup eliminating that the conception of cup is not eliminating? Right? There are many, many, many more cups than green cups. They are, in that conception of green cup, they are not there. Right? All other colors are not there. Right? It's just not there. So you eliminate everything that is not that. It's a very different way of engaging in the object, how the conceptual mind engages and how the direct perception engages. And so in order to understand the workings of the mind and what our mind is doing with reality, we need to know this. Right? We need to know that although the object appears like that, in my conceptual mind, something very different happens, right? You already say it. Well, what appears there is not that, right? It's not that. The way it comes to the mind is also not the same. It's very different. A different way of engaging with the object. One receives all the information. I might not be aware of it, but I receive all the information. The other one eliminates everything that is not that. Right? And they can work at the same time. So I see a cup, then I process it, then how it conception comes in my mind, and then this is exactly what we do with the emptiness, no? I project that conception onto the cup. The conception that I have of cup, I project it onto the cup. And then I think that conception that I have of the cup is coming from the side of the cup. It's living here. Well, here is nothing that is that conception. And so the quality of how the conception, the information that the conception has, these qualities, is very different, is it, to the qualities that are living here, that are here. And I put them together, and I believe it's all there. Everything that I've seen here is all there. The conception is permanent. So when I project my conception of cup onto this, it looks already permanent. The conception eliminates everything that is not cup. Only cup. Cup. One thing, unitary. I project it. And I think that unitary cup is living here. I need my mind and say, is this really unitary or does it have parts, right? Oh, when I look at it like that, I can see it has parts. But when I'm in my mind and I project, it looks like it's one cup. There's only one cup there. What are you talking about parts? There's only one cup there. Right? And then the quality of that conception is that it is independent of anything. It's like you dissect it, right? You seek, cup comes about by eliminating everything that is non-cup. There is no connection between anything that is not cup and cup. Nothing. There is also no past and future. There is also no causes and conditions. Completely independent. And you project that. And that comes back. These three qualities, permanent, unitary, and independent, comes back. And we believe that's the quality of the cup. How can the cup break? It's an independent cup, permanent. Right? So what we need to do is to realize what we project and see how that is coming from our mind and that is not here. That is eventually where we want to go with the mind. It's not here. Here are just things that arise from causes and conditions that depend upon their parts. They're completely dependent upon so many things and upon the mind that is seeing that. But the way the mind works now, it's seeing the opposite. Right? And so if we want to study the mind, we need to know about negatives. We need to know about non-cups, right? We have to remove everything that is a non-cup. What is a non-cup? A non-pot, the opposite of pot, is like very difficult, when you say, and so that happens a lot in the debate. I can't get my mind twisted so much, but it is for people who do it, it's fantastic. Anyway. So these are two negatives, non-affirming and affirming. We just hear it and now we let it go and we don't have to. Non-affirming negatives is, for instance, the emptiness, emptiness is just emptiness. It's like something that we thought was there is not there, but it doesn't affirm anything. And then in the illustration of the second, of affirming negatives, the opposite of not being a functioning thing, there you already go. It's like it's very difficult. I think just remember the fat man doesn't eat in the night. That is an affirming negative. All right. And then there is a whole lot of things about
Is dependent arising and affirming negative?
a dependent arising. Is that an affirmative? Yeah, I would. A negative. Why is it a negative?
Because things are dependent, they must be empty.
But that is already the mind thinking like that, right? But if you talk about the dependent arisings, it is what everything arises. That is a positive. Is it? Whatever arises. I would say that it is a positive, but I have to think about it. We'll think about it. So there is a whole section. Different phenomena can be divided into false difference, true difference. Then the pots isolate and the pillars isolate is an example of this is all the debate language. We're not going to go there. First of all, because I don't get it. Second, maybe that is already enough motivation not to go there. So then we can also see that these debate texts, they're coming back to this Hinayana point of view, right? And so then you debate within this system. And then you always think like, but this is not correct. This is not correct. It's like I can debate something from two different angles. And every time I get stuck somewhere because the way that they think is not completely in accordance with reality. So then when you do debate, you come at places where you think, this doesn't work, or this is now finished, but it's not clear, and like that, right? But you can do many nice debates and you can learn the principles of the debate. And so when there's the monks debate, they use text from the Sautantrika point of view. And then when they know how to debate, then they start applying the debate to the text from the mind-only point of view. And then they use the text from the middle way point of view. Right? But they use the technique that they learn within the Sautantrika system. All right. So what we're going to concentrate a little bit is a little bit on the object possessor and on the self. What is the self? And then the objects of negation is like, what do we need to realize in order to become liberated? What do we need to realize in order to become enlightened? Maybe we focus on that so that we cover that for all the schools in this weekend, right? And then you know that there are many assertions that we have at this moment no idea what that is, and that's okay, right? But there is still a lot that we can go into much deeper, but you need a frame of mind and you need to see that, and I cannot give you that, nor is one weekend enough for that. All right, so we'll have a little lunch break till 2:00. Then you think we should come back and continue like this? You feel you want to have time to ask questions or to talk about things?